Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the April 9th Planning Board Workshop. Thank you to those of us who are joining in. Maureen, could we start with a roll call of the board?
Yes, Jason Sawinski. Okay, Jeff Manson,
Here.
McQuaid,
Here.
John Allegro,
Here.
Anthony Vaccaro,
Here.
Anthony.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
This is Jason here as well. I was muted.
Okay, and Pat.
Here.
Thank you. We're all here.
Just a reminder to everyone, the topic for tonight that we're going to be talking about is a review of the town board law around the CCR floating zone. That in part was prepared by our chairperson, Bonnie Francis Firm. Bonnie has recused herself for these discussions, and that's why I'll be leading the meeting tonight as the acting chair. If everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the States
of
of
the
America,
United States of America,
to the
to the
Republic
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty.
for all. I'd also like to recommend, since you're all in a place you're familiar with, you locate your closest fire exit in case of an emergency, and be sure to sign out of waybacks before evacuating the building. With that, we
And now I'm gone.
spent some time at our meeting on the 30th reviewing all of our concerns, feelings, questions about the CCR and the
Hey,
law.
John, Jeff,
Yes.
will you just remind everybody to mute their mics if they're not talking, because I get a lot of noise here and it's hard to hear you.
Thank you. Yes, if everyone can mute their mics, if they're not speaking or preparing to speak, if you have your cell phone with you, please put that on mute or vibrate. Thank you, Anthony. So I think what we'll do tonight is we'll review. Ashley has prepared for us a document that we can submit to the town board with our feedback on that. It went out this afternoon to everyone. I hope everyone's had a couple of minutes just to read through that. But what I think we'll do is just kind of read through it like we would any resolution that we do, and just kind of take it point by point, just to make sure that we've gone over our feedback before that gets submitted. Please keep in mind, what we're trying to do here is submit a document that covers our feelings as a board. So we talked about 3 different areas of concern. One, the overall law itself. Also, the test site area, and also our involvement in the process of CCR going forward. So the letter kind of addresses each of those things. Outside of our feedback as board members, we're also able and entitled, of course, as citizens of Monroe, to submit our own individual questions or feedback that might be beyond the scope of what we as a board kind of had unified feelings on. If you would like to do that, you would submit those by email to Mary Ellen Beams. As the original submission date was the 16th, but that has been extended. The town board extended that at their last meeting, and I believe it runs through April 20th now. So you have a little bit more time to prepare that. And so if there's something as we're going through and you're like, well, I'd really like to ask this question, I'd really like to, provide additional feedback, you do have an opportunity to do that as an individual board member as well. As our good friend Ward Brower likes to remind us, in our role as private citizen. So don't hesitate to do that. So just going through this letter, I'll read through what Ashley has prepared for us, again, like we do with the resolution, and I'll kind of stop after each one, and we can just make sure that everyone is on board. So it begins. The planning board has reviewed the proposed zoning amendments to create a conservation cluster residential floating zone, also known as CCR, and the related draft generic environmental impact statement, also known as DGEIS, at meetings held on April 30th, 2020, and tonight, April 9th, 2020. I have been authorized by the planning board to convey its comments and questions on the CCR law and DGEIS. These comments and questions are broken into three categories: planning board responsibilities regarding the CCR approval process, the CCR concept, and feedback on the test site. Please note that the below represents only those comments and questions of the planning board as a whole, and that individual planning board members were advised they can submit any additional comments, questions they may have separately to the town board. So under the section of planning board responsibility, number one, and when I go through each section, and then I'm going to ask for feedback from the board on to make sure that we're all on board. So 2 points under planning board responsibilities that we seem to have in common. One is the planning board is in favor of having a 60 to 90 day period of review to review the CCR petition. We had a discussion about that, and in the existing law as written, it's a flat 60 days, and we were kind of back and forth over we might need some more time, to do that effectively. In part because of our meeting schedule and when it's released to us. Number 2, the board is seeking confirmation that it will maintain its architectural review powers for any site plans or subdivision applications submitted for properties in a CCR zone. Section 5794B2I of the proposed law requires the Master Development Plan, MPD, submission to include, in quotes, conceptual elevations of proposed buildings in each use area, and identification of general architectural or site design features necessary to ensure the community character or aesthetic character of the component area, use area identified in the MDP, end quote. If the planning board does retain architectural review authority, would that authority be constrained by what was already approved in the town board by granting the CCR designation, and if so, to what extent would it be restrained? So, based on what I've read so far, I'd just like to kind of see, is anyone have any concerns about what we've included? Anything that that we're really missing? John?
Okay. I recall my recollection of the conversation regarding the 60 to 90 day period. I do remember saying myself that, when you do a 239, and has to go out to the county, there's a 30-day window within which the county has to respond, and that 60 days is, more than enough for us to get our opinion together on the CCR petition. So I'm going to say I'm not in favor of point 1 as it's written. I'd like to poll the board and see if we could go back to the we are in favor of the proposed 60-day period.
Sure, we can absolutely do that. Before we, well, all right, yeah, let's do that. So I guess let's work through member by member. And you can just let us know 60 day or 60 to 90 day. All right, so John obviously feels 60. I'm actually in favor of 60 to 90. Anthony, how do you feel about that?
Go either way. I'm certainly support John's idea and agree with him, but it's not critical to me. I think it might be critical to the applicant.
Lisa?
I would prefer 60 to 90, but, you know, we are a majority, so if it goes to 60, that's fine with me.
Okay. Jason.
60 to 90. We all have full-time jobs with other responsibilities. And while, yes, this is a large, we do value the applicant's time, we do understand it. We also have other things that need to come as well. And I would favor 60 to 90 days.
And Pat.
Pat's muted.
Pat, are you with us?
Yeah, I have no strong feeling one way or the other. That's the third time I said it. You could only hear it this time, though, obviously. Did you hear me okay?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just counting here. So we're split. We are this is for a 7-member board normally, so that we don't have that issue. However, I would say since Anthony doesn't have strong feelings one way or the other, we're leaning towards, the 60-day period. I'm okay with that. My concern is kind of what Jason's is. We all have other responsibilities, and I'm just a little concerned about when that referral is delivered to us, because we do only meet twice a month, and in some months we only meet once a month. Although if we had this on our plate, I assume we would certainly get that onto an agenda. But yeah, I could live with 60 days. So in that case, we probably want to consider striking that point. It's not a major concern of the boards that it's 60 days. So with that, how about point number 2 regarding architectural review? Anyone have a issue with us asking that question, getting that clarification?
But
Go ahead, John.
And I'll just give you, I'm going to give you my, I'd like to share with the board my overriding concerns with what we're saying here in the letter. And
Okay.
It begins with this point. It'll be a recurring theme in future points. I think one of the things that we didn't consider, a secret process is environmental, social, and economic. We're supposed to examine, or the lead agency is supposed to examine all 3 of those aspects when it comes to a project. And one thing we didn't really discuss was the economic impact of what's proposed here. I think that what's proposed here strikes a very good balance between what we could see 10 years from now when it comes to suburban sprawl, should all of those acres go forward as currently zoned. And I'll reiterate my point from the last meeting that, we could see about 180 units as presently zoned today, or 90 days from now, let's say. And then 10 years from the date of certificate of occupancy, the amount of units could double. And because of the accessory apartment law, there's a very good throttle on the footprint of all of the units with the proposed cluster development zoning. In addition, there's that 5% footprint of storefront, restaurant, and service offices, or services. And I think that from an economic development standpoint, number one, the town is getting tax revenue, and number 2, the town is inviting more business into the community, and it's business that will serve a purpose because there'll be stores that are located there for convenience sake for the senior citizens would be able to walk to those stores instead of having to wait for a dial-a-bus or drive and contribute to neighborhood traffic. So my understanding of the purpose of this law is to kind of fast track this type of proposed development without neglecting the responsibilities of the developer and the respective boards, planning board and town board. And based on my experience with the board here over the past year and 4 months, we tend to act very slowly with certain projects or desired changes by property owners that in my mind are relatively small. And I keep coming back to the architectural review. It took us 2 or 3 full meetings to allow Outback Steakhouse to paint their building. We're still in the process of allowing DG management to change landscaping and move trees in an alleyway. And, they started with us in September. And I think that if we can pre-package some of these architectural review aspects, perhaps have a list of allowable elements, design features, what's not allowed, colors, etc., guidelines. Every home shouldn't look the same. I think that we're doing our community, the town government, and the developers a better service by not having to drag this thing out with a prolonged architectural review process. So, that's my opinion of it, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I gotta say, I don't think that. I think that's exactly what we're trying to clarify with that question, and maybe we need to reformulate it a little bit. But when the new zoning was put into place, one of the things after the comprehensive plan and the new zoning was enacted, the town board placed in the hands of the planning board that architectural review authority. And because of some of the language in the CCR law, that you may read that to say that architectural review will be wrapped up as part of the process of CCR review, and that in this situation, the planning board won't be reviewing it. And I think that's what we're just trying to clarify there is, will that still be a responsibility of the planning board, or will it not be a planning board responsibility? Or if it is still a planning board responsibility, is it more narrowed? Because if it is part of the CCR review, then just like you said, then it doesn't have to be a factor of our review, and it shouldn't be if that's what the law intends. Or if they were only looking at narrow aspects of it, either of those would serve to expedite, as you said. So I think we just want to get some clarification on, we were given this responsibility. If the CCR process covers that, and then we just know that that's not on our plate. So I think we just really want to clarify that. I don't think we're necessarily commenting one way or the other whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, whether we're for that, against that. Frankly, I don't have an opinion whether we're for or against it myself. I just want to kind of understand whether we're still responsible for that.
Well,
how about the other members of the board? How do you feel about point number 2?
Can I just respond, and then I'll be quick?
Yeah, please. Sorry, John.
So, I'm just gonna. I'm sorry if I'm hammering it, but as it stands right now, if 4 members of a 7-member board don't don't like the particular shade of beige that somebody wants to paint their building, where, I think we're doing a grave disservice to moving things forward. And, we're in a situation where, we're everything is shut down now for a month. So things are delayed as it is. And economically speaking, and, economic is part of that environmental impact statement. I think we have a responsibility not to slow things down too much. And I think we need to keep that in mind because, our town is going to need these mortgage transfer tax revenues, and they're going to need those property tax revenues to recoup the tremendous losses that we are currently experiencing. So, that's how I feel. Like I said, I think we need to, step up and feel a sense of responsibility and civic duty to really do our best to not slow things down because, well, we have a busy schedule and, everybody has a busy schedule. But we live in the digital age and we can submit comments over the interwebs and, get on meetings like this and call each other. So, I think we really have to consider, especially in light of what's going on, making sure that this town can survive this disaster that we're going through and recoup from it.
Any of the other four members
I'll
of
go on
the
mute
staff
now.
have any? All right, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, John mentioned that it was DG Management. I assume he was talking about the outside sitting area. That is actually Harriman Business Park, and it's under RD Management, just so that there was no, I want it on the record with the right account.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that through me.
I do believe that one has been approved also. But just if the board wants to give a feel of whether you want a comment in at all, or you want it taken out, you want it modified to say maybe that you're seeking clarification as to whether or not you would have that review. It's really up to the board. So,
Question.
Yes, Anthony.
So with regards to architectural review, would we be giving that to the town board, and what, would they would have to go through the same decision-making process as we would, and I'm not so sure that they would do it any faster or any better than the planning board. So I'm not so sure that, they would do any better job for architectural review, but maybe I don't understand the intent.
Well, it's not our place to be able to give that authority back to the town board. The town board grants that to us under they can have a separate architectural review board, but in the town of Monroe, our board has decided that they're going to have the planning board double as the architectural review board. I think the question is more, the way that the CCR law is written is, are they in that situation retaining that authority at the town board level? And if so, fine. Again, for me, it's a point of clarification, not a point of contention, so to speak. How about Lisa, Jason, or Pat?
Before you move on, just another
Please.
question or follow-up with regard to time, and definitely, I think we all respect everybody's time, and even people who are investing in our community. But I also like to say that, with regards to time, we're making approval for infrastructural changes and development that will be here for 50 to the next 100 years. So, 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get a decision right, which I think we've been making decisions fairly quickly, and we're holding to what we're supposed to do. I think, time is a relative matter.
Good, Anthony.
Anyone else?
Hey, can I just respond to one of Anthony's comments, because it was actually a very good point. In my long-winded way of talking about the architectural review process, I would like to suggest that the town board sets architectural standards. I don't think anybody wants to see another pale stucco building in this town that have all been popping up, you know. And I think if the town says, you know, exterior materials can be comprised of these sidings, this type of roofing, and be limited to these color palettes. I think that would help us come to a decision much more quickly on the architectural review. So that's really what I was getting at. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Jason?
John, I think you'll appreciate this point. Why not let the market decide it? I mean, you're right. I don't agree. It's our job to tell people what color beige they can paint their house. I think with Outback, the problem was they showed up to a workshop meeting where we couldn't take any action. And the problem with RD management was there were lot coverage factors that needed to be addressed. There were bank parking counts that needed to be remeasured, recounted. And there was also a certain use that was being proposed or could have been proposed with a fairly dangerous element, such as an open fireplace that wasn't in. And all of those factors came into us sitting there for meeting after meeting, discussing whether or not to have a fireplace or a grassy knoll. That I think I can understand. But I think for something like this, I don't envision the town board approving neon orange townhomes. But they might. Mike McGinn or Tony Cardone might say, you know, I'd really like to pass a neon orange house one day. And that's very much within their right to do so. I think you're looking at a separation of powers here, though, where we have been delegated this authority, and as Jeff said, they could, under their good grace, they could take it back. I think not so much an uproar in the public, but I think you would see a lot less cohesion with the context of the neighborhood or the town as a whole. We see that kind of authority.
You got it.
Folks, not that this isn't an interesting conversation, and I think it is, and obviously it's something that we've all been thinking about, but number one, I think if we're going to have a conversation about how we exercise this authority that's been granted to us, or should we be exercising this authority, or the limits on that, number one, I think it's a conversation that we should be having with the planning board chair present. Number two, I think that we would want to prepare for that conversation a little more by getting some more background truly on what authority we do have as an architectural review board, what that's all about under New York state law. And number three, honestly, it's a little bit off topic for where we're at tonight, which is we're really trying to focus on the CCR review. And again,
our hands are kind of tied right now because Bonnie has recused herself from this conversation.
She's recused herself from talking about the CCR. But we're not really talking about the CCR now. What we're talking about is.
If I could maybe simplify
our
this
process.
one issue for the board.
Thank
So
you,
right now you have architectural review, but you don't have it over every type of application. Right now in the town code, there's only certain types of applications. So single family homes, for example, there's no, I believe generally no architectural review. If it's a subdivision with multiple homes, it's a different story. So I think really the question is, or what I had thought the board's question was, is that for this CCR zoning, will that be something that is subject to that review or not? And if it is, then is it going to be just based on the existing standards, or is it going to be something else based on that master plan that the town would be approving?
So what I'd like to do, what I'd like to accomplish is to find out whether you feel we should be asking for this clarification or whether we don't need to ask for this clarification. Because we don't need to ask the question, then we just won't. I mean, that's fine, but
I think it's clearly needed since we're having this long conversation about it.
I'd agree with the way Ashley presented it.
okay. Anyone else?
Your categories.
We need clarification.
I agree. I think we need clarification. Yes, I think we need clarification. I think
And-
the way number 2
Sorry,
is
Lisa.
written seems fine. No, that's fine. The way number 2 seems written looks fine. I mean, the first sentence asks, we're seeking confirmation, and I think that's really the question. So I'm okay with it.
So what I suggest doing is actually changing that from seeking confirmation to seeking clarification, if that makes more sense, maybe.
That definitely makes more sense. Pat, you're on board with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And it's honestly, in light of our conversation, I am going to recommend to Bonnie that we explore that a little bit
You
more,
got it.
and then we get that onto an agenda at a future meeting where we can really discuss that topic at length. And again, also with a little more background on the subject in our pocket, if that's of interest to the board, which I'm now very interested. So
How much you win?
we're on. I think we have enough interest in discussing that it's worth getting some more guidance and some more
Way ahead of
clarification on our part in the process and how to exercise that authority that's been granted to us. Because it would be really great, I think, as John says, if we're all on the same page to some degree or another, and to be able to move through that part of the process more quickly. So I'm definitely in favor of that conversation. If I could just remind anyone else who's joined us along the way, if you can just mute your phone or turn down your voice level or cover your speaker, because we are still getting some feedback through the system. So our next section, which is a few points, is in relation to the overall CCR zone concept. So again, I'll read through those. Point number 1, all maps included in the FGEIS should be updated to show that the current town boundaries. Certain maps in the DGEIS show boundaries as they existed prior to the annexations of 183 acres and or 58 acres of the town land into the town of Palm Tree. Number 2, if the CCR zone is landed by the town board, could that serve to help satisfy any requirement for the town zoning to provide URM, urban residential multifamily, housing, if the MDP provides for that type of development? Most of the land in the town's URM zone is shown on the zoning map adopted in November of 2017, has since been incorporated into the town of Palm Tree. The remaining URM parcels in the town include Lamplight Village Apartments Complex, the lands being developed in the Bald Hill project, and several parcels located near the Smith Farm development. Number 3, the CCR and DGEIS do not address how the Ridgeline Protection Overlay District and Water Supply Protection Overlay District requirements would apply to the properties of the CCR. Does the landing of the CCR zone affect those requirements? In other words, if the town board adopts CCR zoning for a property currently within those overlay districts, would the requirements of those districts still be in effect, or would they be superseded by the CCR zoning? It is presumed where the CCR zone is landed, any portion of the CCR properties within the RPO or WSPO would inherently be part of the 65% set aside because of the conservation value of such land. However, the CCR law expresses
Can
a
you hear me
preference
now?
that the developed 35% is the area closest to village borders, and it is possible that such area could include land within the overlays. Number 4, the board is concerned with allowing the use of central water and sewer and prefers the requirement that the properties in the CCR would be served by municipal water and sewer. Number 5, the board is concerned about the strain on village resources and does not believe that the DGEIS adequately addresses potential impacts on the village police and water, as well as traffic impacts on village roads. The village of Monroe should be asked about its willingness to supply water, and the village police should be consulted given the amount of additional traffic that will be directed into village intersections. So those are the 5 points, again, under CCR zone concept. So maybe I'll start this time. Pat, any thoughts on those 5? Anything additional, anything concerning?
Nothing concerning me. I thought they all sounded very reasonable.
How about Lisa? Lisa, you with us?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was talking this whole time. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
There's a lot of points to go through, but as far as number 2, where it says if the CCR zone is landed by the town board, I don't know if we should have some type of a description of what that term means, since this is a new concept, and maybe that word landed is a new concept, unless I'm unaware of that. And then in number 4 and 5, I don't know that they contradict one another, because one says the board's concerned with allowing the use of central water, and then number 5 says that they need to ask the village for it. Now, one of my questions is are all of these CCRs going to be like at the outskirts of the village, that they're all going to be requesting village water? Because, you don't know how much, like, we don't want to make it that they all have to tie into municipal water sewer and then not have enough water sewer for everybody. So you don't know that there are going to be a requirement for, or not a requirement, but there might be where you're going to have wells rather than municipal water. So 4 and 5 to me, well, they almost sound opposites of one another. And then, like I said, the word landed is just sticking out to me as, if I had to take a couple times to read it, maybe we should either give a definition of that, or I'm not sure what the word landed, how that's used. But that's my thought.
In relation to landed, it's something that's used both in the proposed legislation and I believe in the DGEIS. And the term refers to, with a floating zone, since it doesn't actually appear on a map at any point until the town board grants that authority, approves the CCR zone. But the process of when the town board would approve the CCR zone and the map that goes along with it, that is referred to as landing the zone. That they're actually saying, yep, this is where we're going to apply this zoning, as opposed to normal zoning where you look at a map and you go, okay, this part of the town is in this zone and this part of the town is in this zone. In the case of the CCR, you just have properties that are eligible to be part of the zone, but they don't inherently have that authority until the town board acts on that authority. It's my assumption.
Is this a new term now, or is this something that's commonly used I just haven't seen before?
I believe it to be a common term in relation to land use law and in planning as a thing. And it's not something we've encountered in the town of Monroe because, well, at least in our tenure on planning board and in the recent town of Monroe history.
Plus, it's in quotations as if, it is meant to stand out. So that could be why I'm looking at it.
Right. So perhaps we should include a small explanation of that. What's your thought on that, Ashley, if I may?
So Lisa, the term landed, that's being used because this is a floating zone. So as Jeff was explaining there, so that's probably why it wasn't familiar to you if you haven't dealt with a floating zone before. So I mean, if it makes more sense to take out the quotes, I could do that. I thought I maybe had taken that from one of the documents I read, but I could be mistaken. So that you think helps make it clearer, then let me know and I'll just take out those quotes. But I'm sure that the town board would, and the town board's consultants would know what is meant by that term.
Yeah, it could just be me then. But like I said, if it's in quotes, sometimes quotes to me is something that jumps out like it's not used in the ordinary term. So however the wording should be, you're the professional, that was just my comment on it all.
More thoughts from the board? Why don't we go to Jason? Folks, I'm kind of particularly interested in Lisa's comment on number 4 versus 5 and how you feel about that overall, as well as we're going through.
Okay. I think I can sort of parse through that. Just on a side note, it sounds like number 2, it sounds like we're having a little bit of buyer's remorse from recent elections with getting rid of our urban residential multifamily area. But I'm digressing. That was part of the trade-off that we made as a town. So I think this is just it's not the best effort at trying to remedy that damage. As for number 4 and 5,
Jesse, could you walk me through that? I don't fully understand your comment. I think that's interesting.
I believe HUD is the one that requires most municipalities to have a certain amount of land set aside for urban residential multifamily. And that's applied throughout various state agencies and enforced locally. A lot of what the town had in URM prior to the annexation or separation, divorce, whatever you want to call it, was zoned URM. The town of Monroe has since lost most of that land. And now we don't have much urban residential multifamily within the current town borders. So, as for how it could apply, maybe, perhaps, it depends on the type of dwelling unit, I guess. I don't know the specific metrics into how that's determined. As for number 4, let's see, that's central water. I think we should be using municipal throughout to avoid confusion. And number 5, there was a water report done, I want to say 2012 by the village that says, and I think that's where Neil got his numbers from in part of the appendix. I believe it was Appendix D, was the last page of the DGEIS, when he wrote his letter to the town saying how much water supply the village actually had. I don't know how accurate that is to date. I also, and this is something I've been thinking about a little bit more recently, is why not just annex into the village of Monroe so you get the services without having to talk to both sides. But that's for the developers to question and not really our decision to make. I'm okay with points 1, 3, and as they are.
And I'm sorry, can you just go back? You were saying in relation to 4, can you explain that again for me?
Allowing use of central water and sewer. And
Yeah.
Okay, that's, never mind. I didn't read that fully.
Okay.
Number 4, I like.
Okay. And number 4. Anthony?
Before I get going, I just want to comment that I'm enjoying the pet life that you have going on behind you.
Thank you. This is Gemini.
Between your
Before
dog and your,
Stitch.
looks like they're happy.
I'm not good with introductions. I never have been.
They're happy critters
That's
there.
my wife.
I'm waiting for the armadillo to walk by.
I'm going to.
Armadillo is stuffed and it's just out of frame. Sorry, Anthony. We digress.
To comment, I think 4 and 5 are going to carry a lot of weight and would impact decisions on CCR. I think, I mean, I agree that we don't want a private entity running, like an HOA running a water or sewer department, because I think that's just destined to fail. And we don't want to have our residents without those services. Wasn't necessarily think that central water and sewer had to come from the village. I mean, it is possible to have it from the town if they want to form a district to serve that. They serve it, or if they could get sewer to Orange County Sewer District. With regard to 5, if the village is going to weigh in on the services they can provide, particularly with water and sewer, or water, they don't handle sewer. I'm going to speculate. I don't know for sure that the village is going to say, no, we can't provide water beyond our boundaries. Or if they do, it would be on a limited case. So if they don't provide it and the town's not going to provide it, and we require municipal water, then, it's a done deal, and it won't be developed.
John?
Sorry, Jeff, if I could just cut in for a second. I'd just like to add Anthony's to comment for number 4. Like Anthony was saying, the water could be developed with on-site wells and treatment facility to supply the development. It could be dedicated to the town and therefore be a municipal water system instead of getting water from the village. So
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I think what Sean just said is very important, especially in follow-up to what Anthony said, because if the village of Monroe says, no, we cannot provide water, then we're in a catch-22 and we've got a dead project. And I am not as concerned about the term municipal for water and sewer because of what Sean just said, that, the town could work out, or the village could work out a dedication agreement with the developer to either create a water district or bring it into the Village of Monroe Water District. As far as point 5, I do believe this has all been, the proposed law and the DGEIS have been shared with the Village of Monroe. And, I'm sure the town board will hear from the village about this. So I'm not sure if we're kind of overreaching or, maybe ceding some of our administrative opinion to the village by saying that. So I'm a little concerned about that point. And I'm sure that any project that is proposed with a CCR clustering would go before the village anyway in the same way. So I'm just a little bit concerned about number 5.
Can I jump in just to sum things up
Please.
about what John said? Is that all right?
Yeah.
So just, John, just with regard to the terminology between central water and central sewer and changing that to municipal, I think that protects to make sure that, if the developer makes an agreement with the town to dedicate that infrastructure to the town and the town operates it, that is in sense, that would solve that. I mean, if you say central water and central sewer, I think that's a larger scope and that would allow a private developer, either developer themselves or, hiring a contract, but somebody would have to pay that contractor and to run it, and then that would require some sort of agreement. So I think if you're going to go through that extent, you can have a central well that's operated by the town. So that's why you would want to keep municipal water in place.
Right, but technically it doesn't become municipal water until it's fired up, right? And dedicated.
Dedicated
Yeah.
is when it becomes municipal.
So I think, John, in that situation, there would need to be some commitment by the developer and the town board that they would, want to dedicate it and that the town board would want to accept the dedication before it could be municipal.
Right. Right. Okay.
And I think having that designation of municipal water and sewer in order to get planning board approval, it would need to be accepted, or dedication would have to be on the record that the town board would accept dedication of that municipal system.
So if I may, come in at the end on this, I think part of the reason why we wrote number 4 the way we did is we do have some concerns with it being a central water or sewer system. I think, generally speaking, through our conversations, again, we prefer that it be served by municipal water. We're not demanding it. We're not insisting it. We're making a recommendation here. I think in relation to having some further discussion beyond what was had throughout the DGIS process with Village Resources, I personally believe that that's warranted. I felt like feel like it wasn't extensive enough. Again, that's my opinion on that in reading through it. One of the interesting things, and I started thinking about it when Lisa was talking, is of course there are properties throughout the town of Monroe that are eligible, that would be eligible under the CCR floating zone. They might be near the village of Monroe. They might be near Harriman. They might be near the borders of municipalities outside of the town of Monroe. So whether we're talking town of Chester, town of Palm Tree, I'm not sure if there are any out by the Tuxedo border off the top of my head. So when it comes to sources of providing municipal services, we're not solely looking at the village of Monroe to provide everything to every property that might be under the stricture of CCR requirements if they were indeed enacted. The reason why we kind of wanted, I thought, the conversation with the village of Monroe, though, to be a little more extensive of that is, in many cases, it's the village of Monroe who is providing water into different areas of the town. So for that reason, I thought the conversation was a little bit more well warranted with the village of Monroe. But when I'm thinking municipal water, I'm thinking about all of the municipalities, both villages within Monroe and the surrounding towns, and anyone who has water that they're willing to provide into one of these assorted properties could be eligible for a municipal water source, or and I mean sewer. We're talking about the sewer district. If I can jump back to number 2, because we talked about that a little bit for different reasons. Honestly, that was my question, and frankly, it was for me mostly a point of curiosity. As Jason was talking about, there is a requirement in New York State that every municipality provide some sort of URM zoning, that it's appropriate, that to make sure that people aren't being excluded from your community. There's a lot of reasons for it that the state set that up. And while there is no set percentage of your zoning that has to be URM zoning. I did some research on it years ago after a conversation with somebody in town government who kind of explained to me URM, and I wanted to learn more about it. You know, and looking through the maps through the DGIS, I noted exactly what Jason did, which is, you know, many of the properties that we formerly had that were URM are no longer in the town. So kind of as a point of curiosity, I wanted to know if this zoning might help provide for that kind of zoning, that kind of housing in this situation, because I think it is important that as a municipality, we live up to that responsibility, and we're a little bit more limited in our ability to do that with the remaining properties that we have in the town. So that's why I kind of wanted to ask that question.
Jeff?
Yeah, John. I think
Sorry.
yeah, no, please.
You know, I see that Councilman McGinn is on the call. Maybe he could kind of give a little overview on that URM question, if he wants.
We could consult Mr. McGinn as a sitting expert if he has some feedback on that one way or the other. Councilman McGinn, thank you for joining us. Did you have any thoughts on that? Any information you could provide us in relation to that question, or is that something you'd want to have an opportunity to look into more yourself?
Jeff, I just jumped on the call, or just jumped on the conference. Can you just repeat the URM question, or any of the other? I caught some of your other concerns about water and some of the other issues, and I'll be happy to opine on any questions that you have or anyone else on the board has, since I was kind of very much involved with this, with the drafting and of the local law for the zoning that kind of precedes this.
Okay, so for your benefit, with everyone's willingness, I'm going to reread number 2, which relates to the URM. Number 2 is If a CCR zone is landed by the town board, could that serve to help satisfy any requirements for the town zoning to provide URM housing, urban residential multifamily, if the MDP provides for that type of development? Use of the land in the town's URM zone is shown on the zoning map adopted in November 2017, has since been incorporated into the town of Palm Tree. The remaining URM parcels in the town include Lamplight Village Apartments Complex, the lands being developed in the Bald Hill project, and several parcels located near the Smith Farm development.
So regarding that, there was in our revised comp plan that was again adopted in 2017, there was more than an adequate resource of URM housing, URM zoning in that comp plan. So we don't. I mean, the reason for doing the CCR is not to satisfy any particular zoning requirement. It's to give flexibility and zoning types that meet the specific needs of some other things that we're looking to do in the town: economic development, senior, workforce, and things along those lines.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to feedback on the CCR zone concept questions?
I think Mary Bingham's on the phone as well. I would, not for nothing, Mike. I think, you're a very knowledgeable person. I want to hear what a former planning board chair would have to say on this subject as well.
Councilman Bingham,
Okay,
if you're
can
with
you
us,
hear me?
if you'd like to speak on the issue, we would take any feedback on that.
Yeah, I think the URMs, we have an adequate supply as it stands right now. As Councilman McGinn said, this also had to do with the CCR, had to do with some open space area that we wanted to preserve, as well as some economic benefits compared to single-family residential homes.
Thank you. So since we've had an opportunity to get some feedback on that question directly from our town board in this meeting, would we like to strike point number 2?
I'm in favor of that.
Anyone not in favor of striking it? Okay, good. So let's remove point number 2 then, since we've now had that addressed. I don't think we need to belabor that point, and we'll just reordinate the other things. Moving on.
Jeff,
So we couldn't loop back later if we decide to. But to our third section under test site, we have.
Jeff, before we move on.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. So just one additional maybe clarification that we could get kind of relates to number 3 is whether or not environmental constraints such as steep slopes or wetlands and wetland buffers can count towards the 65% of the conservation of the total proposed development. I'm not sure if that's clear in the law.
Yeah, Jeff, can I add to that quickly?
Yes, please.
Should this be based on the total developable area or the gross area?
Right.
That helps me understand
Ashley,
that
do you
point.
remember if that is clarified in the law in relation to Jason's point? I don't, honestly.
All right.
I remember
Want
there
me
was
to
some
opine on that,
definition of
or-
it under the law, but
Would you like me to opine on that, Mr. Chairman?
sure.
Okay, so the 35-65 split, 35% being the developable property and the 65% being the conservation easement. That 35%, any environmental constraints, wetlands, steep slope, that's included in that 35% that would be developed. So whatever environmental constraints we have in our current comp plan would apply to that development, the parcel to be developed. And then, of course, the conservation easement, it really doesn't matter with those 65 acres because they're not being developed. So we're going to assume that those, and I think it kind of states it in the zoning, in the local law, that those, the most environmentally sensitive areas are the ones that we're really looking to preserve in any of these, in any scenario where we would be doing the landing of the floating zone. So so when you look at the test case, that's perfectly consistent with the test case. And if you look at it, the area that would be developed is you can see that the wetlands, all that stuff has been taken out of that roughly 90 acres that would be developed on. And I don't think there is some slope, but I don't think it's classified as steep slope. So that's not an issue there. But the other wetlands and everything else is considered as part of that.
So just so I'm clear on what you're saying, Councilman McGinn, on the 35% that would remain developable, are regular constraints that would further limit that 35% if those conditions exist, like the wetlands in the test case or steep slopes in other situations. Or
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So based on Councilman McGinn's feedback, do we feel we need to add another point relating to that at this juncture, or are we good? Board?
I still don't understand. I'm just going to give you an example. If we had a 100-acre lot, 10 acres couldn't be developed because of steep slopes or wetlands. That means the 65-35 split would be based on 90 acres.
My understanding is it would be based on 100.
Yeah, it's based on the gross.
Okay. That's a little different than I was understanding. So I don't know if the board has
Yeah, I think it should be based on the 90. Does the board agree on that example?
I disagree. So again, if I'm following the explanation from Councilman McGinn, if land is undevelopable because there's wetlands in it, and it's going to be part of the conservation easement, I don't think the developer should be double banged for that land. They're already not developing those wetlands that are part of the conservation easement. So let's say there's, I don't know, in Anthony's example of 100 acres, because that makes the math easy for me, 15 acres in what's going to be the 65 acres that are set aside are wetland. So they're already coming at, the 65% is all preserved. Should the 15 come out as a percentage that limits the 35% in that case, if there's no wetlands in the developable area, or, steep slopes or that kind of thing?
consistent with our cluster development?
My understanding
Cluster development takes out the environmental constraints before you calculate open space. So it would be different. I can double check.
I believe that's correct, Ashley.
So then maybe that is a point we want to point out then. Lisa, Pat, John, how do you feel about that?
I'm trying to follow what's going on here. I think Anthony makes a good point.
Well, do you use, net developable instead of gross? Is it so?
No, I don't think it is semantics. I think you're right. I think that's exactly what Anthony is suggesting, that the entire property, anything that's inherently undevelopable anyway, shouldn't be part of the overall calculation of the 35-65, and that by doing that, it would be consistent with our current process of how cluster developments are handled under the law. Is that right, Ashley?
Yes, I'm just pulling that up now to.
While you're doing that, John, what's your thoughts?
I see this as a different situation from the standard clustering abilities in the current law. So I understand that difference, I'd say, and or it's
John,
also
if I could just interrupt for a minute, it actually is, the cluster is 50% of the gross area. So it would be the same.
we're at 65, right?
Well, it would be a different percentage, but the same concept being gross versus net. The open space in the cluster, it's measured by the gross area, and that's the same that's proposed here.
We're good.
The CCR law would be consistent with existing law. Can I repoll Anthony, Jason, Pat, and Lisa to see, does that change your opinion or no? Which is fine. Do you see as it should be different here, or should it be consistent with what we're doing?
Well,
Anthony?
I'd like to be consistent with what I'd like to see, and I'd like to see it be based on the net and not the gross. But I certainly appreciate your statement about being double hit for, codes already in place to protect property. So that my opinion is I'd rather see it based on the net.
Jason?
I second that, based on the net.
Okay. Pat?
I will as well.
Okay. And Lisa?
Okay, well, I'm a little torn. Like I said, it's a little hard to follow what's going on here, but I think the consistency, where it's, with the cluster, it's based on the gross. To have this based on the gross, I don't have a problem with that, but I would prefer the net. If we were going to change it, I would say, Mike, I would lean towards the net as well, but I don't have a strong opinion on it, maybe the way other people do. Thank you.
Jeff, or Ashley, did I just mishear you though? Didn't you say that the current law is 50% of the gross?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so 65 is better, right? If you're preserving 65% of the land?
Yeah, you're preserving more land. I think the question was whether that was 65% of, that should be 65% of the net developable area or 65% of the gross. So the cluster regulations measure the 50% by the gross. We're just trying to, I guess, figure out whether the board wants to recommend or suggest that it's going to be changed. They would want it changed here to the net.
Right. So, yeah, I'm a little torn on this one, Ashley, too, whether, the majority of the board feels that that net is the better calculation for the CCR thing. And again, it's a recommendation that we can make. Are we strong enough about it that we want to do that? Or is this something that we want to say, well, we're split on this and maybe we should comment on that in individual feedback if we feel that it's warranted?
I'd like the unintended consequences are another here.
Well, keep in mind that what we're really talking about here, this entire thing, is a referral was made to us as a involved agency, interested agency in this case. Sorry, interested agency, for our thoughts and recommendations around this proposal. Have an effect on the final environmental. Anything that we bring up in our referral, either they have to show that it's been addressed by the DGEIS, or they need to provide an answer to that question or concern in the in the final. But it's our opportunity to influence the ultimate outcome, but it's merely that. The decision-making authority here is not ours. we're not deciding on net or gross, but if we have a concern about it, if we have a preference, then we're within our responsibility to present that, as we are with all of these other things. My feeling is that there's enough feeling on the board that that we ought to list this as a concern, much like we kind of did with number 4. We have a preference. We have a concern about, using the gross calculation rather than the net. We're not absolute on it. Again, kind of like number 4. So if everyone's comfortable with that, we will prepare an addition to the letter that addresses that as our preference. Everyone okay with that?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, I don't hear that anyone's on fire against, so we'll do that. We'll add that as a preference. Absolutely. So let's move on to our feedback on the test site itself, and I'll read through those as well. So number 1, the DGEIS states that there is an ability for the Village of Monroe to supply water to both the western and eastern parcels of the test site, in parentheses, based on the current use of the system, in parentheses, but is the village willing to supply water to those parcels? Who would pay for a potential expansion of the water facilities? And is there another possible source of water for the test site? Number 2, the Village of Monroe Police Department should be consulted with respect to traffic mitigations and response times at the Rye Hill Mine Reynolds intersection and the Reynolds Orange Turnpike intersection. The comments of the village police should be made part of and responded to in the FGEIS. Number 3, the FGEIS should identify alternative traffic mitigation measures that were studied for the Rye Hill Road, Mine Road, and Reynolds Road intersections, and at Reynolds Road and Orange Turnpike. Number 4, the town board should consider use of rumble strips on Rye Hill Road to control speed coming down Rye Hill Road towards Mine Road and Reynolds Road as traffic mitigations in this area. Number 5, the FGEIS should specify who will pay for the all-way stop signs at the intersection of Rye Hill Road, Mine Road, and Reynolds Road. Number 6, the town board should consider a traffic light and left turn lane at the intersection of Reynolds Road and Orange Turnpike as a mitigation measure. The planning board disagrees that the consultants stated acceptable amount of traffic backup during rush hour, in parentheses, 9 vehicles, in parentheses, is appropriate, especially considering the road geometry and how Reynolds Road intersects at a short and steep incline with Orange Turnpike. People have enough difficulty making left turns onto Orange Turnpike into oncoming traffic at this intersection without a long line of cars behind them pressuring them. Additionally, when Town Hall is completely renovated and reopened, there will be additional traffic on Reynolds Road exiting to Orange Turnpike. It is unclear whether that was taken into consideration in the DGEIS. The town has plans to utilize the large social space for meetings and events, both town-sponsored and by renters, and when those events let out, traffic may be considerable. The FGEIS should address traffic impacts associated with a fully operational town hall, including use of its large social space for meetings and other events. Number 7, the board expressed a concern about the western parcel's traffic plan. According to the MDP for the test site, there are 3 entrances to the western parcel. Traffic flowing from each of those intersections has been graded at a level of B according to the traffic study. The board is concerned about the traffic flow, particularly traveling downhill on Rye Hill Road. In addition to a number of street intersections already feeding to Rye Hill Road, there are numerous private driveways that exit directly onto that roadway. It would be preferable to minimize additional entrances onto Rye Hill Road, a road where sight lines are not always the best and downhill traffic often exceeds the stated speed limit, particularly along the long straightaway where it intersects with the test site roads. It appears that the middle of the 3 Rye Hill Road intersections could be combined with the northernmost intersection. That would still provide enough opportunity for the residents of the test site to get in and out of the property while minimizing the interference with the flow of traffic that is already along that already busy collector road. The middle exit to the western parcel could turn to the north in front of the apartment buildings and run parallel to Rye Hill Road until it connects to the planned feeder road, leading from the complex's middle parking area out to the drive leading to the northern parcel exit. Number 8. Is there a way to require an engineer's cost estimate for public improvements for conventional land development and proposed CCR development to see what the difference in infrastructure costs would be as a comparison, and propose that the estimate be considered for development? The board is concerned that developers will seek to use a CCR option for greater profit and not have the mutual interests of all land development stakeholders in mind. So we have those 8 points and any others that we'd like to bring up tonight. Why don't I start with Lisa this time, if you would? Any thoughts on those 8 points?
I started last time, and I have to confess, someone came to the door. I left the meeting for 5 minutes. So could you please start with someone else?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Jason?
I'm satisfied with almost all of them, since almost all of them were a collection, or this is pretty representative of my thoughts and opinions on Rye Hill Road. I think Village would be interested in including rumble strips to continue down Rye Hill on their road. The only problem I can see with that would be plowing, but then I'm reminded of the rumble strips heading towards Barren Mountain on Route 6 there as you approach traffic circles, and those are fine. I would like to see rumble strips continued further down up until about Colony. Then people would slow down to start making their turn at the intersection. So that's really it for now. What's everyone else have to say?
Fine, we'll loop back on that. Let's bounce to John. I'm going to try and break up the order this time.
Yeah, I'm gonna restate my opinions on this whole discussion about traffic that we had that I gave you guys last time. First, this is a test case, and I'm having a problem sharing the other members' concerns about this, because the traffic study measurements are not based on how incrementally less or greater traffic would be compared to a total build out. Where we're comparing, I think we're taking a look at this as if it's either this or nothing is going to happen, and we all know that something is going to happen. Considering a complete build out on 1 acre lots, what would the traffic be and how different would it be? And I think the amount of required units dedicated to senior living is 15% in the CCR rule, and that would be, they don't drive as much. Seniors don't drive as much, so maybe I could take advantage of the fact that Councilman McGinn is on the call, and maybe he could shed some. Mike, could you shed some light on, were there any considerations of the test case traffic study versus complete 1 acre build out?
John, if it's okay, can we go through all of the board's feedback and then get Councilman McGinn's feedback? I think that's a good question for the councilman. Then we can visit that once, if that's all right. Okay. More thoughts? Or should I move on and maybe come back to you?
Well, those are my thoughts. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Pat, why don't we go to you next?
concern with this test site has been the traffic flow, because last meeting, I feel it's a dangerous road, especially when it's snowing out. You know, there's hardly enough room for two cars to pass when there's a lot of snow on each side of the road. Certainly, it's unsafe for people to walk or jog up and down the road. So that's that point. I think whatever we do, any plan that would limit the amount of traffic, such as two, would be good. The other thing was, when it was originally put in, our family owned that property, or a lot of it, and we were granted certain rights as letting that line go through. I guess that was with the village. I don't know, and I know we still have those rights. I have to wonder whether that property that goes up to what I would call Ford Field towards the water plant still has those rights. So it's something that could be researched. I guess you could probably ask the village. They would have that on the record, and I think that goes all, you know, or whatever.
Other thoughts? Anthony?
I have a comment. No real, I like the comments the way they are. I was the village highway superintendent about 20 years ago and had his right about the rights that were reserved by the property on Rye Hill. And they have water rights, and that was a contentious issue. And I know that line is overdue for replacement, and it's a very sensitive area. So I think the village would be encouraged I think that was one of the sticking points, is the village wanted a developer to come in and upgrade that line to current specifications. And, you know, it's expensive to do because it's a main feeder line. And the other thing, I with regards to traffic, I think all the residents on Rye Hill Road would appreciate having rumble strips, but I could see potential complaints from the people who live across from these rumble strips, because they'll hear the traffic going over it at night, because there will be an audible consequence. But those are not, you know, substance or substantive. I just mentioning it. But overall, I think the comments are good.
Back to Lisa, if I may.
Thank you. I don't have any comments on numbers 1 through 8. I think they look fine the way they're written.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm also good with these overall. John, I absolutely hear what you're saying about the comparison. I guess my opinion is we have the opportunity to look at and render opinion on or concerns relating to the test site that's being proposed. The 7 properties that that's comprised of, as we see in the DGIS, we're all in various stages of development, some further along than others. I absolutely would love to have an opportunity to opine on each and every one of those if they were to go forward. I know that in some of those cases that time has passed, and in the cases where it hasn't, I'd be interested in that, being involved in that discussion as well. So I'm just, but because they're all in various stages of development, a little bit is they are what they are, and that is what it is. Those may indeed wind up being what happens along the Rye Hill corridor, depending on the outcome of the town board's decision on it. However, being tasked with the opportunity to look at the test site and express what our concerns are about that, I like that we're taking the opportunity to bring all of our experience in that area of town to bear. Councilman McGinn, some information that you'd like to provide us?
No, I just, the one thing I would say is that whether, um, just, just to kind of clarify that with the CCR, if uh, if the town board received a master development plan for from a developer or development group, and we decided to land that floating zone, whether it be Rye Hill or in one of the other, approximately 10 sites in the town that would qualify for it, uh, once we land that master development plan and say, we're willing to use this overlay, the zoning overlay, to allow you to develop there, it still goes to the planning board for site plan approval. So in other words, any concerns that you have at that point, whether it be traffic, uh, water, sewer, all those things would be things that you would normally address anyway as part of the site plan approval. The only difference would be is that probably it might be further along as a lot of times when the developer comes before the planning board, they would not have this master development plan and with grading and design and a lot of these things done with it already. You know what I mean? You would be ahead of the, a little ahead of the curve with that, but really for the most part, you would still be doing all the normal things that you would do, whether like again, traffic, water, sewer, secra, anything that goes along with it would be part of the process. So, I would try not to get too hung up on the Rye Hill Road, with the test, the test site for this, and look at it more as a total zoning concept.
Clarifying question, if I may, Councilman McGinn. So, with the exception of with the test site, that the seeker process would already be complete because of the fact that it was used as the test site.
That's correct.
If the test site were to be developed under the law and under and as long as it doesn't have to go through the seeker process again, the site would still be subject to every other aspect of the planning process with the planning board. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. All the normal, all the normal functions of the planning board that you perform would still be done as part of the site plan process. Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's
If I may, I have one more clarifying question for that, just to make sure I understood that this would not be the environmental review for a project of this size.
Elsewhere. Yeah. The test case site is the SECRA, the DGIS that's being done for that site is specific to that site. So if someone, a developer came in on one of the approximate 10 other sites in the town and decided they wanted to develop there, they would be starting from zero with doing the SECRA for it. Yes.
So an applicant
All right.
wouldn't have to reimburse the town for this?
You mean for another site or for this site?
For this test case site?
That would be a matter of the master development plan and how it's presented to the town and at that time. So if the test site was presented to us, we would look to build that in to whatever fees the town was going to receive from the developer.
Understood. Okay.
All right, could I opine in here for 1 second? Councilwoman
please.
Bingham here.
I was just planning on inviting you, so thank you, Councilman Bingham.
Okay. I'm a little confused because I thought Max Stock, when he made his presentation before the town board, he said that whatever we accepted with this, well, currently we're looking at the draft, but eventually to be going to come the final, that if the developers or developer for this Rye Hill project wanted to use it, they could use this draft / final environmental impact study for the Rye Hill corridor. So I'm a little confused as well.
No, that's correct, Mary. You're 100% right. What I'm saying is, if a developer came in and wanted to do another area that's not the test site, the test case, then they would have to do the normal, secret process for that, wherever that site is in the town.
Right, but for this Rye Hill corridor, this is going to be the final GEIS,
That's
once
correct. Yes.
the town board adopts it. So now I would like to opine a little bit about the Rye Hill traffic. Going back to 2002, I agree with Mr. Shea, and I believe it was Jason was saying that the traffic on Rye Hill, because of especially icing conditions in the winter, can be especially treacherous because people that are going down the hill occasionally have to cross over to the other lane to avoid the icy spots. So when some of the projects, Jeff, as you had mentioned, that are in different stages of the development on the Rye Hill corridor there was supposed to be a parallel road developed within those future projects to alleviate the traffic and the possible accidents that could occur during the winter months. Now, I know the traffic study that was done in November, and this year it probably wouldn't have mattered because we had like no snow. But in years past, when we've had like 3 feet of snow, Rye Hill has serious problems, and I just hope that that would be considered.
All right. Hey, Mary, let me just respond on that real quick. So that parallel road that was supposed to be built when the separate development plans existed along the Rye Hill corridor, if you remember correctly, those development properties extended all the way over the top and then down the top of Rye Hill, then down
They
Berry. I think it was Alpine. I think Alpine Ridge was the last.
It didn't go quite as far as Alpine, but Pollock.
Yeah. So those that parallel road kind of made sense when we were talking about going all the way up to the top there. But with the way that this with the test site plan is, obviously it's a whole different scenario.
Right, because that would be the open area up at the top now.
Right, because that area is all now conserved or conservation easement. Listen, I live on High Ridge and I go down Rye Hill Road all the time. Listen, obviously, if this was to go forward and decide to land the CCR, the floating zone in the test site, then there would have to be traffic mitigation done on Rye Hill. There's no doubt about it, and things would need to be done there, and things would need to be done on Reynolds for sure.
Well, I think that's the planning board's concern. Is right now the only mitigation seems to be a 4-way stop sign down by Reynolds, Rye Hill, and Mine, and possibly rumple strips.
And I would agree with that statement, Mary. Not only tonight, frankly, but it was very much a part of our conversation on March 30th, and based on my review of my notes about our conversation tonight. So it looks like the majority of the board is comfortable with our recommendations and questions and concerns regarding the test site. Just to be thorough for a minute, I'm going to read down to the bottom of what Ashley has prepared. So we've all gone through the whole thing. And there's a final paragraph after we complete our section on the test site, which reads, as indicated above, this letter report conveys only the comments and questions that were endorsed by the members of the planning board. Additional comments, questions raised by individual planning board members during the meetings have not been incorporated herein. These individual members were advised they can make their own submissions to the town board with respect to those matters. Please do not hesitate to contact me should you have any questions or comments. Yours very truly, Ashley Ann Torrey. Reviewing our conversation as a whole, again through my notes, in general, it sounds like we're in consensus on this. We're going to now take out the question about the number 2 in the center section, which is about the URM. That's been addressed here at our meeting. We know the answer to that question. There's no need to go there. We are going to add a comment about net area calculation versus gross area calculation as our preference. We're and the board is generally in favor of and comfortable with the 60-day period for referral. So we're going to remove comment number 1 under planning board responsibilities. That being said, the rest I think we're generally in agreement on, but I'd like to confirm that with an actual vote that we accept with the changes as I just described them, that this be our letter to the town board as our planning board response. Noreen, would you take a roll call vote on that, please?
I think you need a second, Jeff.
Oh, may I have a second to what I'm making a motion?
I second.
Thank you, Pat. Any questions or discussion before we vote? Noreen, if you'll go ahead with a roll call vote, please.
John Allegro,
Yes, with reservations on the net gross issue.
Thank you.
hold on, I'm just making a note. Lisa,
Yes.
Anthony?
Yeah.
Pat? Jason?
Yes.
And Jeff.
Yes. All right.
Unanimous yes with reservations from John.
Thank you for that. So we'll get that finalized and we'll get that submitted. A copy of the final, agreed upon letter will go out to each of you as well for your records. Before we close our meeting tonight, in addition to our conversation, in addition to our submittal, as our attorney, Ashley reviewed the law as a whole and had written a letter to, really to the town, addressing those. I hope everyone had a chance to read through that document. And Ashley, if you could just give a little bit of an overview on that, and then maybe we could see if anybody on the board has any questions regarding what Ashley's prepared, and then we can have a conversation as to whether we agree that our planning board attorney should be submitting this as well.
Sure. So this was a memo that I had put together to the planning board just as I was reviewing the law, just some things that just I had comment on. They're really more technical in nature and just thinking of how things are worded and whether there's some maybe clarification that could be given, just thinking down the line when we're, trying to implement this, how it might need some clarification in certain areas or just language consistencies, that type of stuff. So I wanted to give that to you as the planning board. I mean, I'm sure you're going to have, because you're now in the secret review process, typically before the final law is adopted, and maybe one of the council persons or the supervisor could speak to this as the process in the town, if the planning board is going to have another opportunity to comment on the actual law before it goes into effect. And that might be a better time that we could maybe go over these comments to you, because these are really focused just on some technical things about the law.
Councilman McGinn, Councilwoman Bingham, any feedback for us on, will we have another opportunity to make any comment on the final draft of the law prior to it being voted on? Actually, I believe Councilman McGinn has left the meeting. Is Councilwoman Bingham still with us, Ashley?
Yes, I'm still here. I really don't know the answer to that question because we've been holding the public hearings open for comments. So I guess if it came up as a question during when we get your letter, we can address it at the next town board meeting, because I don't have an answer right now. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for the information. Did anyone who had a chance to read through this review from Ashley have any questions for Ashley about that? In my reading of the document, it was very much like when Ashley is going through various language that has been submitted from applicant attorneys on resolutions and things like that, and just coming again to a like-mindedness in terms, a consistency, clarification of some things under the law. I didn't have any questions based on what Ashley wrote, but I do want to make sure that anyone else has had that opportunity. Anyone?
This is a minor comment.
Sorry, yeah, Lisa, please.
Sorry. In the second line, it says, right after the who it's to and the CC and all that, it's just the Conservation Cluster Residential. It says CRR, but we're referring to it as CCR. So I don't know if anyone wants to make that correction. And I'm not sure if this is going anywhere, if it's just for our purposes. But that just jumped out at me, that's all.
Well, we're going to be deciding whether it goes somewhere tonight, and that's a very good pickup. Yeah, it is CCR.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
And again, this was my, just initial thoughts on reviewing the actual law and just more technical clarification issues. So it's not at all something, that I expect or, I'm asking the planning board to endorse. I just wanted to make you all aware of things that I had picked up on, just wanted to point those out to you and for you to do with it as you wish.
Well, I guess my question to you then, Ashley, would be, so should we be calling the question whether the planning board would like to recommend that this letter be submitted to the town board as feedback on the law and their law firm? Or
I think that's a great idea.
Necessary?
I agree with you, Jeff. I think
If that's what the board wants to do, so it's, maybe something in there you think doesn't make sense. Maybe it's not something, that you think is warranted. It really is up to the board. If you want to, we could then, include that to the town as well, but it's really up to you.
I agree with Jeff. I think it's a good idea because this spells out this. I mean, the other is from us, and then this would be from the attorney. I think it's a good idea from the planning board attorney. So it sounds good to me.
Other thoughts? I'd like to make a motion then that we request that Ashley, pending the change that Lisa pointed out, submit this to the town board and their attorney again for their consideration in relation to this. Personally, I think it is an eye from our attorney looking to not only perfect the law but protect our interests as the planning board in going forward through the CCR process should it be approved by the town board. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Noreen, can I get a roll call?
Anthony Vaccaro,
Aye.
Lisa McQuaid,
Aye.
John Allegro,
Aye.
Jason Storinsky,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
and Jeff Manson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that being said, that completes our work for this evening. Again, I want to thank everybody for their thoughtfulness, their participation, their thoughts on all this. Obviously, it's a big issue for our town, and it's potentially a big issue for us to deal with down the road should this law be enacted. So again, I really thank you for everything you've done over the last 2 meetings and in between in working on this. May I request a motion for dismissal of tonight's meeting.
Make a motion, we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll see.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Everyone, have a wonderful night. Thank you, Ashley, again for hosting, and Sean for being here. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.